Hello, this is Deborah Anderson, the Black Woman Animator, coming back to you with another video. And in this video, I have Swinton Scott. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I'm going to have you introduce yourself a little bit, not too much because I'll be asking some questions, but.
All right. I was born in Philadelphia, PA, and I got into animation back in 1980. And I've been working in-house and freelance that whole time. Right now, I'm kind of in-house, but everybody's working at home. So I'm working at home on a project that's yet to be announced. And I've worked on probably tons of TV shows that your listeners, viewers have seen throughout their lives.
Definitely. I'll be listing those later. So you're from Philly. So how was it growing up there?
Very few cartoonists that I ran into there as far as people that liked what I liked. Very few people that like comic books and cartoons. Finally, a comic book shop opened in '73, so I met a few guys there that liked comic books and told me about different comic book artists that I hadn't heard about, and illustrators and painters. So that was really cool. But as far as having a group to depend on that liked all the stuff I did, not really, no.
So you told me earlier about your high school. Can you tell me about that?
Well, Germantown High, we didn't have lunch in school because the school was a little bit too rowdy. So we went to school from about 7:45 in the morning till 1:30 in the afternoon, and then it was go home. So at the time I first got in '71, I guess there was a lot of gang activity, which seemed to die down as the years went on. And by the time I got to 12th grade, it was not as bad as when I first started. They'd had a pretty bad reputation, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of my cousins who grew up in Philly told me a couple of years ago that he heard about some sport game where Germantown High got into the fight with the other high school, and it was pretty obvious Germantown won the game and the fight. So they were pretty badass there.
Yeah, it sounds like Inkster High from where I'm from. I'm from Detroit, but I went to high school in Romulus, and so Inkster, I played basketball, and so they had security at the games. You never know what happened at an Inkster game, so it sounds kind of similar.
Yeah.
So tell me about the neighborhood you grew up in.
Well, the neighborhood was, I think we were between two street gangs, but I grew up across the street from a park, and I had a park to play in all the time, anytime I wanted to. Never had any trouble, really, and all through high school, didn't have any trouble with any of the bad kids or anything. So it was a pretty sedate time. I think the crime rate had gone way down by the time I reached 15 or 16. So it was, I would say, a pretty good high school by the time I got there, and my neighborhood equally a good neighborhood. People had jobs and went to work every day.
Yeah.
Never had any problem with the kids in the neighborhood or anything. So I rode my bike, played basketball as much as I wanted, had a great time.
I feel like the culture of, different Black communities has changed, because back in the day, even in the 90s, it was like, even if there was gang activity, they didn't mess with the smart kids or they didn't mess with these kids. But now, these days, it's just like a free-for-all. So I feel like it was a different culture back then, possibly.
Probably.
Depending on where you were from.
Yeah, probably, yeah. And I think mostly gang kids like to mess with kids that they think are a threat to them. So if you kind of know that you know how to hold your hands and fight, they'll come after you. But if you're just an average kid, why are they going to waste their time?
Yeah. So what was your relationship with art and animation throughout your childhood?
Like any other cartoonist, a wasted childhood watching cartoons and reading comic books. I would wake up in the morning early and watch cartoons on local TV, wait for the weekend to come and watch more cartoons. Got into drawing them, I guess, when I was 8 years old. And cartoons at that time were Hector Heathcote, Dick Tracy, Alvin and the Chipmunks, and a lot of others. I'd rush home from school every day and watch cartoons. but I didn't think about doing it for a living until I got into art school, really.
I feel like it was a waste for other people, but for you, it was research.
Yeah, yeah. But nobody knew it at the time. Even I didn't know
Right.
it.
Hindsight is 2020.
I kind of thought that I would go into architecture when I was
Mm,
coming up in high school, and I took architecture in high school, architectural drawing. So you have to learn how to design a house on
yeah.
paper. And my
Hmm.
dad was a draftsman, so I had all the drafting supplies I could use. And I learned a lot from him about drafting and all that stuff. So that's kind of what I thought I would go into, was just that.
Yeah, with I mentioned that I use both sides of my brain. I went through architecture, industrial engineering, and actually before I found animation, my junior senior year of high school, I was going to become an electrical engineer.
Mm-hmm.
But then animation showed up, and I was like, oh, I can do this. I mean, I like watch stuff, but I just never thought about doing it as a career for some reason. So
Right.
I was always good at math and art. So you went to Temple University, and I've heard about it having like a strong Black presence, despite not being a HBCU. So how was the community there when you went to Temple?
I didn't go to the main campus, which was
Okay.
in North Philadelphia. I went to the art school, which is outside the city.
Okay.
School of Art is actually in Elkins Park, PA. So it's just across the city line. So it's about 2 miles from my house where I grew up in Germantown.
Okay.
So I rarely went down to Temple. When I did, I thought it was going to be one way, but it turned out to be a very calm place, and I could wander around the campus and go from building to building. Everything was fine down there.
Hmm.
But since I didn't actually go there, have any classes there, I didn't have any reason to spend a ton of time there.
Definitely convenient for the art school to be so close to your house.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So you've worked for a lot of animation studios throughout the years. What is something that has stayed the same, and what has something that has changed in animation over time, both in the culture of studios and in the medium?
Sheesh. Hardly anything has stayed the same. When I got in and we were drawing on paper, and I was an in-betweener assistant animator for a couple of different studios, Hanna-Barbera and Pantomime Pictures in North Hollywood,
Hmm.
everything was on paper, and you kind of knew what to do. You could hear stories from the old guys, but even in those first couple of years, we did a couple of shows for Hanna-Barbera that were done for a computer. They
Hmm.
would color them on the computer, and so they gave us different types of paper. It was a blue tinted paper. Every space had to be closed off. And I don't think any of us thought too much of it then, but we should have seen that that would be the way to go. That was something that I guess we kind of saw that coming in '82.
Hmm.
What we didn't count on was that as we got older, the jobs became a little bit scarcer. Not scarcer, but just some of the guys got passed over as we got
Yeah.
older.
Hmm.
And there were fewer older guys for us to ask questions of, because when we got in, most of the older guys were 20 to 40 years older than us. So
Hmm.
they were retiring and passing away during our first 10 years.
Hmm.
It's kind of strange not to have elders to ask questions,
Yeah.
to talk to and say, hey, how did you guys handle this and this back in your day? If they're
Right.
not there to ask, now you've got to do it for the first time, basically, on your own, and figure out how to do it, how to solve the
Right.
problem. So that's something that's changed over the years. No elders, yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think? Because I've talked to several, veterans, and there's been that difference in culture where I was telling someone the other day, like, you'll never really have the nine old men again, because it's like a lot of ageism, or they think people only 40 and under can be at the studio. So I'm wondering what the thought process of the change from allowing older people to stay in those positions and then trying to get rid of them. Like, I wonder what that change was. Do you have any ideas?
What the change was, besides us aging, you mean? I mean,
Like, there not being that older contingent of like animators or people, like I feel like they have some ageism today where they're trying to keep the studios young because they feel like young people are the only people who can animate young or
Well, they're the easiest to take advantage of. And
so capitalism or the bad version of capitalism.
yeah. As far as not having 9 old men, I think that was from a time in animation history that can never be duplicated. So you probably won't get another set of 9 old men. From what I've seen in computer animation, I don't see too many instances where I think a certain guy animated that scene. Whereas in 2D, I can say, oh yeah, somebody that I know animated that, and I can tell by how he draws the character. But I don't really get that feeling in computer animation. Maybe it'll change. I don't know. I guess if fewer people work on the project, certainly somebody's animation style will show through because there's so many fewer people. But if you have an army of guys, they all have to stick to one style of animation. So it's hard to pick out an individual, a star guy that's doing the stuff. Yeah. Yeah, 9 old men, that's from a time gone by that will never be duplicated again in history, working for Walt Disney.
Yeah. But it's also won't be duplicated because people aren't allowed to get old in the animation industry sometimes.
Well, he was calling them that, I think, in the 40s, and they were still young at the time.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he called them that because Franklin Roosevelt had picked so many Supreme Court justices that people said that those were his 9 old men, and he could get what he wanted in government. So that's where the name came from for these guys at Disney. But I think they called them that, like I said, in the late 40s or so, and they were young to middle age at that point. They weren't old.
Right. So it's a cultural reference.
Yes. Political history. Yes.
Yes. What else has changed? I know. I feel like there was more training. I feel like today it's a lot of, okay, you went to college, so you already have that training, so let's get you perfect and come into our pipeline. But back in the day, it was more training and hands-on. Do you think that's true?
When I first came out, there was I think 1 or 2 nights a week training program at Hanna-Barbera. And they said, if you come in and let us show you how to do animation, there's a chance we could hire you to work here.
Nice.
And Ben Washam from Warner Brothers was doing free classes at his house also. So you can go there 1 or 2 nights a week. As long as you figured out who to ask how to do this stuff, you could learn how to do it. A big change nowadays is that you could learn anything on YouTube, I guess. You don't have to physically search out some place or people to really train you how to do this. You can actually learn it on YouTube. You could call somebody up and say, can you give me some more pointers about this that I learned on YouTube? And they get fleshing out for you a bit more. But back then, yeah, it was going to the studio at night after work. And I already had a job at Panama, and I'd go to Hanna-Barbera after that for a couple more hours and learn more. It's a totally different time now.
Yeah, that's something that's lost, is that networking, personable thing, because if you're going to someone's house, you're getting to know them, they can suggest you for the job. But now if you learn on YouTube, you have to figure out how to get that connection to get the job.
Yeah, I'm puzzled as to how people get jobs these days, especially now. You can't go to the studio and open up a book of your work on a desk to show someone. And if you're just emailing the studio, they can hit an auto respond thing and turn you down. I understand people post their work and someone from the studio may see it, and then you may get an interview or a phone call, but it sounds very random. Unless you know someone at the studio to recommend you. How do you get that job?
Right.
Man.
So your parents kept drawings from various TV shows you worked on throughout the years. Do you think the idea of keeping things and documenting things for historical purposes purposes was like innately taught to you, which is the reason you were able to give me the photos from back in the 90s of the Black Animation meetup, or you just were randomly taking pictures that day?
I started taking photography when I was in art school, and I loved taking pictures and going to the darkroom process and printing and all that stuff. And when I got into animation, it just followed that I would take pictures at my job. So I'd bring my camera in every once in a while, and we had set up that Black Animation luncheon like 2 weeks before or something. So I knew to bring my camera that day. And I also knew that I'd probably never get a chance to see that many Black animators in one spot again. So that's how that came about, was purely for historical reasons. I knew most of the people there, so I didn't feel too shy about taking their pictures. I got to meet a lot of new people, so that was great. One of my grandfathers always used to tell me when I would draw, don't forget to put your name and a date on the picture so you know when you did it. And when I was younger, I would never do that. And now I'm looking back at old drawings going, when did I do that? Was that 72 or 73? And I've been posting drawings from way back in those days on Instagram and sometimes Facebook. And I inspired one of my friends to do a bunch of his drawings. So we're putting up our drawings as teenagers of superheroes and stuff. And he saved a ton more stuff than I did. I think I let go of a bunch, but I've still got a pretty good stack of everything that I've drawn over the years.
So were you involved in putting that luncheon together?
I don't think I was so much involved as just telling people who I knew that we were going to be doing.
Okay.
I guess Dan Haskett and Karen, I thought they were more behind putting it together and getting the word out to a lot of people. And the few people I knew, I told them where and when and all that. But I kind of thought it was Dan and Karen's idea.
So do you by any chance have a copy of The Story of the People, The Black Road to Hollywood? Because I was like Googling that, and there's barely a mention of that documentary you were in online. I know you and Phil Mendez were kind of highlighted in that. I Googled, and all it was like one link, and I'm just like, okay, so I can't watch this, I can't buy this anywhere.
I'd have to look in my tapes. I saved almost all my videotapes, and the ones I didn't save I transferred to DVD. So I'd have to look and see if I actually have that or not. I might have it. So I'll look and see. I'll look and see.
That's something else I could post or something, because I was like, man, I would really want to watch that to see what you all said. And another thing is that when you sent me the photos and I posted them, so many people said that they've never seen the photos and that they were like, remember that day. I know Marlon West said that, like, oh man, like, thank you for posting these. I was like, oh, I didn't realize people had never seen the pictures or had, I was like, oh, okay, cool.
Probably 7 people have seen those pictures. They've just been here at my house in the closet all this time. So yeah, hardly anybody saw them.
Historic history. So many animation professionals who have worked on Scooby-Doo have either disliked it or had a bad story associated with it. So far the list is me, you, Floyd Norman. He told, like, when I went to go watch his documentary at Essence Festival, he told a little story about Scooby-Doo, and Dan Haskett said he didn't like Scooby-Doo. So what's your bad experience with Scooby-Doo?
Well, I remember the first time I worked on it, I think it was through Thanksgiving of '81. Mm-hmm. And I remember sitting there at my desk and flipping the pages, and the action that was going on was so stupid and inane. And I called the subcontractors I got the job from, and I said, Bill, I don't know if I can do this. And he just said, man, just finish the job and bring it in. And then he hung up, which got me so mad. And I went in Monday morning, handed it in, and I just said, here you go, here's my invoice. And I turned and left. And they apparently asked my friend, who was also picking up from them, hey, what's Swinton? What happened? And he was like, I don't know what happened. So that was my first time with Scooby, and then years later, I worked on it as a director. And I was comparing notes to my friends who had worked on it back in the 80s, and we both agreed it was a lot better working on it as a director than it was as an in-betweener. It wasn't nearly so bad being a director on the show and storyboarding on the show as it was animating and in-betweening. Not nearly so bad. So I think I've worked on Scoob 4 different iterations at this point, maybe 5. Yeah, so it's been more fun as the years went on. And lately what I do is animation timing on the show. I do exposure sheets.
Yeah, my experience was, my first job in animation industry was in South Korea. And so the company that I worked for, I was in the 3D modeling department because I go by BlkWmnAnimator, but I'm actually a 3D modeler. But so I was working on an episode of Scooby-Doo, the straight to DVD movies, and there was like a ravine, like this rock formation that I was supposed to be 3D modeling because, they would, if it was too hard for the 2D people, they would just bring it to the 3D department. So I was trying to model and texture this rock formation, and usually I wasn't fluent in Korean, but usually I didn't have any problem with understanding what my director needed. But this day it was just like he just kept telling me that it was wrong, and then he communicated to me because I had worked, I don't know how long I had been there. I only worked there a year, but I don't know how long I had been there, but he was like, you should know what I want. I'm like, usually I do, but like I don't know what you want in this instance. And so when I would get upset sometimes, like the building was shaped like where all the windows were outside, and so I would just go to another floor and like walk around because I would be like trying to cool off or something. But Scooby-Doo made me walk around a Korean block, and if anybody knows what a Korean block is in the Central Business District, it's like a New York City block. So I was like, I need to cool off because I don't know what this man wants.
Wow.
And so he ended up giving it back to the 2D department because I was like, I'm not even really a texture artist like that at this point. So I was like, I don't know what you want me to do.
Whoa. Man. I wonder
But that was my only bad experience with Scooby-Doo.
Oh, okay. I wonder which direct-to-video was I probably worked on as a timer.
I know I did Phantosaur. It was like I was over there 2010 to 2011, so a lot of the stuff that came out during that time.
Okay. That was probably might have been one of Spike and Tony's, or it could have been Chuck Sheets. But yeah. Sounds kind of familiar.
I found out that me and Dan worked on like one of the movies, not together because he was in LA, but I was like, oh, I worked on that one too. IMDb.
Right.
Can you talk about directing a cool like that Christmas? How did you get that opportunity?
At that time, I was an assistant director on The Simpsons, and for some reason, the studio, Film Roman, felt that I could be an assistant director on The Simpsons and be an assistant director on Cool Like That at the same time. And I said, when do you think I can do this? Well, when you're not so busy on Simpsons, you can run upstairs and work on that. We'll give you an office up there you can have and work on it up there. And I said, well, you have a director, right? He said, yeah, David Feast is directing it, the guy that created Cow and Chicken. But he needs someone here because he's up in Northern California. We need someone here to actually see the artwork, say yay or nay to it, fix it, whatever. And we'll give you some layout guys to help you fix up the layouts, which are being done in Canada.
Yeah.
So that was how that came about. What it was like to work on it was I was thrown into it. They had already done all the pre-production and the storyboards and everything and the designs, which Bruce Smith designed it. David Feast did the storyboard. And they just said, okay, it's already in production. Go ahead and be on it and make something of it. I said, okay, I'll do the best I can while I'm working on The Simpsons at the same time and not getting a raise in pay. Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah.
But all in all, it was fun. There was apparently a trip to Philadelphia that they made because it was supposed to be based on Philadelphia. and I just missed the trip
Nice.
by so many months, probably because they
Oh
didn't
man.
working on it, and I could have gotten a trip home to see my parents.
Right.
So yeah, it was fun to work on. There was some oddball characters that Bruce came up with. I think my friend Kenny Tompkins did all the mouth assignment drawings for all the
hmm
characters in the show. And Whoopi Goldberg did a voice.
I watched it earlier, so I was like, oh, that sounds like Whoopi.
I think she did two voices. I think she did the main gangster, and I think she did the little brother.
And then Boys to Men was in it.
And they were in it at the very end because they're from Philly also. So that was
hmm
the connection there. Who else of note? Somebody else. Oh, no, I guess not. I thought Tone Loc had done a voice work, but I'm thinking of someone else had a very deep voice and did that.
I feel like because
Well, maybe it was Tone.
is that the right person? I feel like I'm thinking of Tone Loc because I recognize the voice, like the because he was in that movie with the little white kid, where there was like the rich kid. I don't know, but it sounded like his voice. I think if I'm thinking of Tone Loc, that's the right person. It sounded like he was a big voice and like person in that during that time, and I was like, oh, that sounds like him.
It probably is. And then the next year, they developed a show around Tone Loc called Bear and Jamal.
Which you also worked on.
And I went up to talk to one of the guys that ran the company. And I said, hey, I just want you to know, I hear you're working on a show with Tone Loc and it's going to be black characters. I'd like to work on it in some capacity. And the guy was looking at me, he said, actually, we were thinking we would have you produce it. Which bowled me over. And I just thought, really? You think I can do that? And yeah, we think you can do that. No problem. Okay. And I think that was like the end of 93. And through 94, I was directing on The Simpsons. And 95, I did one show with The Simpsons. I directed a commercial that had Snoop Dogg as the main voice. And then produced 3 episodes of Bear and Jamal. So for me, that was like, I won the lottery working on 3 different projects like that in 1 year. And I had a great time. It was so much fun doing Bear. That was a really great experience working on that show.
Yeah, so I feel like in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of projects that infused so many parts of blackness into them, from the storyline, character design, the way they talk, the music. What was the atmosphere of that era that allowed so many of those animated projects to come about at that time? Have you ever both? Like, I feel like with Bebe's Kids and different like black projects that were kind of getting greenlit. What do you think it was about that time that's different from now, where it was like kind of a not a free for all, but it was just like a lot of cool projects that had to do with black people being greenlit?
I would say it probably starts in live action with the popularity and ability to make money by live action movies that were produced and directed by black people.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about like John Singleton,
Spike Lee, the Hudlin brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that Bebe's Kids is made because the Hudlin brothers, who did a couple of movies, including House Party, were asked, what do you want to do next? And they said, we want to do animation. Well, if they hadn't said that, there wouldn't be a Bebe's Kids.
Right.
So one thing has to lead to the next. Back in the 80s, there were few black projects here and there. I can't even remember what they were, but I think there were more in the 70s than there were. And when I first came to California, one of the first things I would ask people in the business was, who made the Bill Cosby Fat Albert special back in the late 60s, early 70s, and who made the Flip Wilson special? And I found out it was Ken Mundy did the Bill Cosby Fat Albert special, and Corny Cole did the Flip Wilson special. And I finally got to meet them, and I finally got to work with both of them for extended times as well. And it was a great experience. So in the 90s, the success of black filmmakers in live action, I think, contributed to, well, let's try some animation with black characters too. And Leonard got to do the show that was based on Marlon Wayans' character.
Wayne Head. Mm-hmm.
And I think he was doing that at the same time I was doing Sea Bear.
Mm-hmm.
And my friend Kenny Tompkins was doing Jungle Cubs TV
Mm-hmm.
series at Disney TV. So the three of us, I think it was the first time they had like 3 black producers of animation working at the same time.
Nice.
And I think also the same time Bruce was working on Space Jam, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah. So yeah, I'd say the live action contributed more to the green lighting of black projects than anything else.
Cool. So let's just list out. Okay, so I'm going to share some highlights of projects you worked on throughout your career in various capacities, including director, producer, animator, storyboard artist, in-betweener, and more. And I just want to say, like, I'm going to name a lot, and I do this with everyone, but I want to explain that because, one, it's important to highlight all the work that you've done. Well, not all, I'm not going to say all of it, but I'm going to say a lot of it. And then 2, it's important that people out there know that Black folk worked on some of our favorite shows and TV shows. And hopefully IMDb is accurate. I don't know. So.
I think it only goes back so many years, and some of the things I worked on at Pantomime Pictures don't get listed because they were a small independent company.
Okay.
But Pantomime is where I learned how to do, in addition to everything else you said, ink and paint, cut film loosely on a film cutting board, read soundtrack, shoot camera, do rotoscoping. So I learned a ton of stuff there, and then got into the studios, and that type of stuff went down because when you're in a small studio, you can learn every single. And Fred Crippen, who ran the studio, and Dave Brain, who was working there also, they would say, "Here, learn how to do this, learn how to do that. We're doing Sesame Street, so can you help us ink cells, and then maybe help us do the painting of the cells too?" So I learned every aspect of the business from the ground up.
So let's start with Sesame Street. Highlights: the Smurfs. So Sesame Street, the Smurfs, the Gary Coleman Show, Scooby-Doo, Muppet Babies, DuckTales, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, Tiny Toons Adventures, Batman, Bobby's World, Sea Bear and Jamal, The Simpsons, The Angry Beavers, The Rugrats, Futurama, Static Shock, Duck Dodgers, Class of 3000, King of the Hill, Boondocks, Adventure Time, Phineas and Ferb, Harley Quinn, and then this one is interesting, The Jetsons and WWE Robo WrestleMania. I looked up an episode of that. I was like, what is that? So that's not everything, but those are some highlights, mostly the ones I recognized and or from my childhood. But I was like, what is this WrestleMania? Who thought of that?
That was a Warner Brothers project because they own all the Hanna-Barbera characters. I'm not sure exactly how it comes about. I did animation timing on it, which means I go in for a meeting and they give me a bunch of exposure sheets and the storyboard. And the producer and director sit and show me the animatic and say, can you make this part faster? Can you make that part slower?
Nice.
Can you make sure this part shines and has some special timing to it? I say, yeah, sure. Take it home. You bring it back in a week. And they say, oh, just put it over there. See you later. But it's fun. It was fun stuff. I never would have thought of putting together those characters with wrestlers. But, you know, when I was at Deke in '84, they were just starting a wrestling show called Rockin' Wrestling, I think, with Cyndi Lauper and Lou Albano, because she was big at the time and he was big at the time as the wrestling manager and a wrestler at one point. So things just go around in circles, you know.
Yeah, because I've been thinking the Jetsons, like I've been asking everybody, like, why haven't they remade the Jetsons? But apparently they have. So I was like, okay, let me look at this. And then I was kind of comparing. I remember when I watched that episode, I was kind of comparing the lip sync of that one to the lip sync of the old school one, because like the old school Jetsons, even though it was pretty simple, I felt like the lip sync was simple, but it was, you could tell what they were saying better than sometimes they do now. And I was like, you know, because I'm not like a 2D animator or anything, I just know stuff is off. I don't be knowing why, but I was like, it's simple, but it's better old school. Like this, they just be moving their mouth today.
not for lack of trying. They simplified the mouths down to so many different mouth codes so that when we read in the lip assign column what mouth shape it should be, that's what it should be. But when you're animating it here yourself and you're doing it yourself, you have a better check on making sure that it's right and that it sounds right. Guys overseas may just run through it and that's it. They may not check it. They may not speak English, so they can't check it really. It's an art form that a lot of people cannot quite get the hang of. And all of us here that do it, I think all of us were animators, so we know how to do it a certain way.
Right.
If we hand animate those characters speaking, mine would look different than Leonard's. It would look different than Dan's. It would look different than Kenny's. All of us would do it differently. I think we would all have that illusion that they're actually saying the words better than if we send these to a contract house to do it.
Yeah.
So that's one thing about the lip assign,
And I can understand that because from my experience working in Korea and from my experience of learning about Korean culture, they're very good at copying or like following directions, but that innate like thing is not there because, when I was there, you will be walking down the street and you will see like a little school and it'll be like, how to do the Harlem Shake. And I'm like, that is so simple. Like, why do you have a school to teach the Harlem Shake or some simple black dance? And then they had another school. I went to one of their concerts. Like, it was one of my goals to go to one of these concerts, but they had like a gospel school where it's like a black gospel school. And they were really good though. It was called, what are they called? Oh man, the Harmony. I can't remember their name, but they would go to like gospel school and then the good people, I guess, got in the choir and they would be doing all these like black gospel songs. But I always said like, I didn't think that was gonna be long term, but if I lived there, I was like, I wouldn't want to send my child to a Korean school because they're very like rote and like, oh, let me remember this information. But when I would ask them, like I went over there as an English teacher. And so when I would ask them, what if they couldn't do it? It's like, it's only like, this is the answer. Not like, with like jazz improvisation, they don't have this like improvisation with life sometimes.
Right. To make things up on the spot. Yeah. So
transfer that to animation, I can see how, because some of them, even like from teaching English, I understood that they could write and read English very well, but they couldn't speak and listen that well. But some of them would have perfect English, but they would be like, oh, my English is bad. I'm like, you speak better than a lot of people in America. so I think it's like a cultural thing where they're just like getting it done.
Wow. I worked on a show a couple of years ago at Disney TV, and it was CGI, and it was animated in Korea. And I asked the producer, how are you doing the show in Korea and there's no exposure sheets for us to do certain things? And he said, well, I have a crew of Korean animators that can speak and read English. And they can translate all that stuff without you guys doing it. I said, I never would have even thought of that. You found a crew of guys that can speak and read English. And you don't need American animators to do the translation, timing, and all that stuff. And he said, and they're very good animators on top of it. Wow.
That's something that surprised me when I went over to Korea in 2009 was that English is everywhere. I'm like, it's kind of similar to if you're in a place with a lot of Hispanic people where Spanish is kind of coexists too. It's like that. They learn English from 5 years old. I mean, it's not all of them like stick to it, and so more of the younger people know a lot of English and stuff like that. But it was surprising how much English was like everywhere.
Wow, I am surprised. Another thing that got my curiosity going was when I was on Scooby in 2002, the Korean studio, I think the owner or the supervising producer over there was here at Warner Brothers to visit, and they may have invited a bunch of us as directors on the shows to go with them to lunch. And on the way back, I asked one of the guys, how do you promote your assistant animators to be animators? And he said, we give them walk cycles to do. in the show. So from that, I got the reason that so many walk cycles in the show don't look quite right.
Yeah.
It's because that's where they're training their guys
Mhm.
is to do a walk cycle, and if you're really good at it, we'll promote you to animator. It's a very hard thing to do, a walk cycle. Don't get me wrong. I do them all the time still, and I
Mhm.
teach them on my YouTube channel. But to use the show itself as a place to train the guys, I thought it shows in the
Yeah.
show when it comes back. You're like, that doesn't look quite right. Oh, well, some novice animated that. That's why. And then too, I think once they get promoted to animator, they stay in that studio for a very short time and they move on to another place. So the next time you're timing the same series going to that same studio, a whole different crew of animators is working on it.
Yeah.
And so every instruction that we take for granted that everybody should know as an animator, no, you're writing it out for a brand new guy that doesn't know what he's supposed to do because he's just been promoted. So you have to write it as if you're writing to a brand new guy every year. And so for all these years, things like, please put the walk cycle on ones because the background is panning. You have to write that because a new guy is coming along that doesn't know any better. That's one of the frustrations of sending work overseas.
Yeah, my department, the 3D modeling department, 3D animation department was very small. It was anywhere from 7 to 11 people the year that I worked there. I remember one young lady, she worked there one day and then was like, I'm out. I'm like, did they not tell you in school how hard this is? Like,
whoa. One day and then.
But I feel like they're from outside looking in, like I feel like their culture allows that because they stay with their families until they get married. So it's not like they have bills.
Okay. All right.
So it's like, I quit. And then education is cheaper in other countries, so you only pay $12 for your degree.
Wow.
So it's not as expensive as in America to go to school. Like in the city that I lived at first, they had they were giving foreigners degrees for free for something, but it was like none of the stuff interested me, so I didn't decide to do it. So you were also a producer on Static Shock. A lot of people enjoyed that show. What do you think was the appeal of that show?
Who had ever seen a black superhero on Saturday morning?
Mm-hmm.
By the time Static premiered, I guess that was 2000. I don't know if they had done the Justice League yet, animated at that point, but you didn't really see black characters as superheroes on TV at that point. Mm-hmm. The show had been on for 2 seasons by the time I got to it. Mm-hmm. And the reason I got to it is because I was directing on Scooby, and the network said, we'd like to do Static Shock for another season. Who do you have in mind to produce it? And so the guy running the studio said, well, who's here? And someone, I don't know who, gave him my name, and they called me into this meeting in his office. Mm-hmm. And Swinton Scott, would you come up to so-and-so's office? All right. And I walk into this office with no idea what's about to go down. There's all these people sitting on a couch and a couple of chairs. And I walked in, and somebody said, Swinton, come on in and sit down. And my immediate response was to hold onto the door jamb and start to back out because I really didn't know these people.
Right.
When people call you into a meeting and they don't tell you what it's about, why are they doing that? You know, there's something big is about to go down. And I just said, all right, come in. They said, no, come on in, have a seat, have a seat. And we want you to produce Static Shock. And I said, sure you got the right guy? Me? I said, yeah, we want you to do it. You did Seabear and Jamal, so you can do Static Shock. And Seabear is a funny animal cartoon. Static is a superhero. I said, yeah, why not? I'll try it. What have I got to lose?
Right.
So that's how that job came about. I just happened to be there at Warner Brothers that time.
Nice. You can do it. So you've been nominated for a few awards and you have an Emmy for Camp Lazlo, Where's Lazlo? How does it feel to be awarded for your work?
So Futurama got nominated. I was a
Mhm.
director on that, and one of my episodes was nominated. So I go down to the tux place, rent a tux, go to the awards ceremony with my wife. I lost. So then Static gets nominated. So I go down, rent a tux, go with my wife to the awards thing, and we lost again.
Mhm.
So then the third time I was nominated for Camp Lazlo with the other animation timing directors. I said, I'm not going to rent a tux this time. So I didn't rent a tux. I just wore a black suit and a black tie. And I show up and we won. That's the secret. Don't rent the tux and you'll win. And it was a great time. We had a great time that night. I think there were 6 timers on the show, or 5 timers. So I was with all my friends up on stage, along with the creator of the show, Joe Murray, and I guess the production staff also. And at the end of it, at the end of the night, I think they had us go into a little tent and they took our pictures together and separately holding our Emmys. That was a great, great feeling. I called my wife, who was out of town at the time, so she didn't go with me, and I called parents back in Philly and told them. So it was really great. It was really nice.
So no tux and no wife are the keys to winning.
I was like, I wish my wife had been here this night, but she couldn't be. She had to be out of town taking care of her mother. So that was the reason she wasn't there. But I would have given anything to have her there next to me that night. That was like one of those special nights I
had. So what do you believe is the key to getting leadership opportunities in the animation industry? I mean, sometimes it just seems like existing for you.
Just being in the right place at the right time sometimes is part of it. And knowing that, I guess people knowing that they can count on you to deliver is the other part of it. So through my career, I don't think I've been late handing in any work, so I don't have a late reputation. I think that contributes a lot to where you go in any business, really. Can you deliver on time?
Right.
These days, with the COVID and nobody being in the studio to actually see you and talk to you, how do you get a promotion now? How do you get a promotion from being a board person to a director if you're not there dealing with the producer every day?
Right.
How does that even happen? I mean, what are they basing the promotion on? If not face-to-face conversation and interaction.
Right.
The great thing about today, though, is that it's easier to do your own film and your own project and get it posted somewhere for people to see than it was when I got into business. And to do it practically free is an even bigger incentive to do it, I would think. I'm hoping there's a lot of young people that are doing their own projects.
And if you aren't, this is your all call. Go do your own project. You have some interesting stories from working in animation. What are your most interesting stories? So a couple that I heard was a pyramid scheme in Orange County, and then pigeons with mites and dirty towels. That's my keywords on my thing.
You want me to tell you about either one of them?
Sure.
So,
unless you have more interesting stories.
So we worked at the studio, and there were 2 rooms of layout artists, and the one room had a balcony, and the guys kept the doors open. And pigeons like to nest on balconies. And at some point, I think I heard the people say their legs were itching. And it turns out the mites and the fleas from the pigeons were coming into the room along with the pigeons and biting people. And people were getting little red marks on their legs from that. And at the same studio, all these people, there must have been 30, 40 people working there. And there was one bathroom that this building must have been built in the 20s or 30s, right? There was one bathroom, and the guy that ran the studio put a hand towel. That was it, a hand towel on the door. And after like a week or maybe 2, I kind of was wondering, is he ever going to change this out? And I don't know if he did, or if he did, maybe he changed it out once, and then I got so angry, I brought in some paper towels. I said, you guys have gone too far, that you don't have enough sense to use paper towels instead of a dirty dish rag for a hand towel. How does that happen? What? And I think after that they changed over, started buying paper towels for everybody. But
they got the hint.
But dang, how do you not know that that's what you should do?
Don't want to have a potluck at that place. Like y'all don't, your level of dirty is not the same as my level of dirty.
What was the other story that you mentioned?
A pyramid scheme in Orange County.
So the studio where I met my wife, they started out in Burbank, and Phil Mendez was designing these projects for this guy. And this guy had money, and he was in Orange County. So Phil has studio space in Studio City and in Burbank. And at some point, I finally got hired there. At some point, the guys from Orange County come up and they say, the people in Studio City are no longer working for this company. We fired all of them, including Phil. And some weeks later, they came up again. And it was a thing like, God, if these guys show up, you know something's going down. That's bad. They showed up on this date and said, you have 2 weeks and we'll make an assessment as to who we're going to keep and who we're going to let go. They never said what they wanted us to do in those 2 weeks. They just said, you have 2 weeks. And then they left. And they came back 2 weeks later. They were good to their word. And they said, they took a bunch of us aside, including me, and put us in a room. And they said, all of you are still working for this company. The people out there in the big room are getting fired right now. And all those people were let go, like right then and there. A couple months later, the company said, we want you to commute to Orange County or move down here. And so I had to buy a car, drive 50 miles one way and 50 miles back. My wife, we weren't married at the time. She was in the carpool with me and 2 other people, Scott and Flavia, my wife, Dawn. And we drive to Orange County, come back. Dawn got married, moved out of town, and Flavia took a job at Filmation. So it became just me and Scott driving down there. Mm-hmm. And I think a week or 2 after Dawn left, Scott called me up on a Sunday night. It might have been Sunday after Thanksgiving. I said, Swinton, we have to go to Orange County right now. I was like, it's 7 o'clock. He said, they're closing down the studio. We have to go down and get all of our stuff because the sheriff is going to come by and padlock it tomorrow morning. So 8 o'clock, we're in Orange County, clearing our desks, taking all of our personal items. It turned out the guy was running a scheme where he said that his business was buying up medical bills, which is called medical factoring. So if somebody owes a doctor money, you come along and say, well, that guy owes you $10. I'll give you $1. So at least you got something. And then you give me the debt paper and I'll go collect the other 9 from the patient that owes you the money. And he was getting money like that. And he got people to invest in that business. And he got so much dough, he said, hey, I'd like to have a hotel and resort in Vegas, have a feature film to go with it, and short cartoons to go with that. And that way you can take your family to Vegas, stay at my hotel and gamble, and the kids will have an amusement park to play in. He was dreaming big.
Right.
For all we knew, it was like, well, a kid's park in Vegas, you know, who knows what can happen, right? And when it all came crashing down, we were like, why didn't we see this? Well, we weren't privy to anything going on, so how would we see it, right? So,
right.
But yeah, things happen in the business like that, and I think that was one of my first times that things can just go away just like that. And so Leo told me, Swinton, always keep a box at your desk because you never know. And Leo was in that group that got let go in Burbank. And so I said, that's good advice. So I always keep a box when I work in the house because you never know. It's like somebody walks in, that's it. Y'all got to go.
Gotta take all my stuff.
Yes.
So are those the two most interesting stories you have, or do you have one more?
When I worked at Pantomime, we did commercials for a company called National Lumber, which was kind of like Home Depot. And they were based in Orange County. And they had a one-man advertising company who came to Fred and said, I want you to animate these commercials with these very simplistic characters. It's very low budget. The guy himself, I guess, did the voices and the music. And they were so quick turnaround to do these commercials. And I'm sitting at the desk, and Fred came in, Crippen came in and said, here's some stuff I want you to in-between. I'm sorry, in-betweening. And it's a National Lumber thing. And I finish and give it back to him. Here's another one I get. And after a while, like 2 hours went by, and I said, well, wait, this doesn't look like the same product that we were pushing in the other commercial. He said, no, it's a different one. So, okay, maybe we'll do 2 tonight. And at some point, I went into his office and I said, Fred, how many of these are we doing? He said, we're doing 6 tonight. Between like 4 in the afternoon and 11, we did 6 National Lumber commercials.
Wow.
Now, when I told my friends at the time, I work on National Lumber, they all said, oh, that stuff is so bad. And I said, yeah, but which of the commercials you're working on will anybody remember? Which ones do they know now? And they said, yeah, I guess you're right.
That's crazy. Has being Black impacted you in your animation career in any way?
No one's ever picked a fight with me in the animation business. So I'd say no, because for it to affect you, usually it's a negative type thing where somebody's not accusing you, but jumping bad with you in some way. And no one's ever done that to me in the business. When I lived in Philly, or just rolling around Los Angeles, there were a couple times where it came up, but in the business, I haven't had anything happen where people said, yeah, I'd like you to work on the project, but since you're Black, sorry, that's never been. Yeah. It's always been, oh, you showed up for the interview, let's interview you. Well, your work looks good, let's hire you. So I've had it pretty easy.
What are your thoughts on getting more content with Black characters in TV and movies?
Does TV still exist? I mean, the networks, when I got in, were showing cartoons every Saturday morning. There was syndication during the week, and that got bigger as the years went on. But the networks don't show any cartoons now. So when you say TV,
TV-ish, like Netflix, multi-episode.
The streaming platforms, if you have your own YouTube channel and someone from one of those platforms sees your cartoon and kind of thinks that you could deliver deliver a cartoon to them or work with their people to make a cartoon, you'll be noticed if it's funny or entertaining, and they'll come to you and say, hey, can you do this? I don't know how successful people are at walking in off the street to pitch a cartoon to them. Since I'm not doing the studio rounds like I used to, I'm not in the know as to who's pitching and who's selling a show and who's not and all that stuff. It was easier back in the 80s. I could hear about, oh, so-and-so pitched a show and they bought it at this network or the syndication company. But nowadays, shows come and go on the streaming platform. Oh, there's a new show on streaming on this platform. Have you heard about it? No idea. There's so much to watch now. I think we're at peak animation, really. Like there was peak oil, the oil business time. I think we're at peak animation, and there's just too much to watch. Not that it's a bad thing. We should have as many choices as possible, but there's so much out there to see. If you can make a cartoon for low budget and you don't pay tons of money for the software and put it up on YouTube and they see it, they'll buy it. If they don't buy it, just keep expanding your YouTube channel and just say, they'll come to me at some point, you know. It'll happen.
Right. As a veteran in the animation industry, what have you decided is your purpose in regard to like blackness or black professionals in animation? Do you try to mentor or anything?
People come to me with questions. I give them answers. I give them advice. I give out books, model sheets. I started doing some YouTube lessons on how to animate a few months ago. I've been so busy on this project, I haven't been there in some months now, but I had fun doing that. And people seem to like that, getting advice about how to do the actual animation. As far as my place in it, like I said, I'm here. If people see my name and know that they want some advice from me, I'm open to giving advice all the time. Not a problem.
What do you hope for the future of animation as far as innovation, storylines, characters? It doesn't have to be related to blackness, just your hope for the future.
More autobiographical stuff of people's young lives, childhoods, or teenage years. Science fiction stuff, more science fiction. It's amazing how there are libraries full of books for all these years, and yet they come back to these same few stories to turn into TV shows or specials or something. I guess because they're so universally good, but there's so many others to do.
Right.
The more you read Black history, the more you go, God, that would make a really interesting story to make animated. The story of Oscar Micheaux doing live action movies back in the day. Wow, no one's thought to do that type of thing. I'm not sure why. Maybe people feel like there's no audience for it, but Black history would have a ready-made audience, I would think. At one point, I wanted to do some animation based on my teenage years in Philly, some of the corner boys hanging out and all that type of thing. And I got so far with it, and then work gets in the way, and you have to make a living, so you have to put it aside. But I did write an outline for a show that I wanted to do, like a TV special or something, or a feature. I got so far with it, and then I had to put it away, and then I would come back to it and do some more writing on it. I drew up a storyboard for the opening, the intro to it, and it was a lot of fun. But that point of you got to make a living and pay the rent, and then other times you're just busy doing other things, and you put aside your personal projects. I'd say the most important thing, though, is your personal project. If I could say anything to young people, don't leave your personal project behind like I did. So mine are just in boxes now. Bring yours out. As soon as you think of it, start doing a drawing and writing for it. Get it out there on YouTube in some way, or your own blog or something, or Instagram, and just get your work out there as fast as you can.
Yeah. Even if you're showing the work in progress, because maybe somebody will be inspired to give you money from the work in progress.
Which people do, right? People get on Kickstarter or Indiegogo and say, here's my work that I'm just starting. Do you want to give me some money for it? I understand it helps if you're already kind of famous, but how do you get famous unless you're putting your work out there for people to see? In some
instances, yes, it definitely works if you're famous. Maybe played football. But yeah, to go back to the history piece, I for Black History Month, I did like daily videos, which, I finished in March. But my last video was about Cab Calloway's involvement in the animation industry at the beginning, when they would like trace his dance movements.
In the Fleischer cartoons.
And then I've thought about, people don't realize that there were black cowboys, or, we were like, there were dark-skinned Native Americans that they wrote in the logs that they look black. There were black Vikings. So there's just so much history that is either whitewashed or you just don't know about. Aboriginals created hockey in Canada. So black people created hockey. So I guess it just got too cold.
Yeah, that's surprising. I had no idea. Wow.
Yeah. It's not surprising. We created everything.
Well,
So, if you had a documentary, what things would you highlight about yourself outside of your work in animation?
Outside my work in animation.
Yes. Like you as a person, like what, because, people come to you for your animation knowledge, but, what else could we learn about you? Do you juggle?
I used to build model cars, plastic model cars when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved that so much. I was at a point where I would build one a week. And they were really
Wow.
cheap. They were like $1.50 or $2. And I got to a point where I could finish it without painting within a couple of hours. I just loved it so much. And I've got 2 boxes of them here that I'd like to get back to doing. So that'd be one thing, is that I love model cars. I love bike riding, which I've loved since I was a child. And it's really weird when you think, gee whiz, I've been riding a bike since John Kennedy was president. And I used to love to play basketball, but at a certain point, you can't make the jump shot anymore because when you come down, you'll break your leg.
There's ways around. So one of my goals in life is, because I kept playing. I played varsity basketball in high school, and then I kept playing. I played with guys since I graduated,
Wow.
and going to these different courts with all these like old white men. I'm like, you just got to change up your game. You just got to not jump. Like, and so my goal is to be like the old black lady on the basketball court. And I just have to figure out how to change up my game enough where I'm still scoring. Cause there was one guy, Peter, when I would go to New Orleans Athletic Club, and, he was still athletic. And so he would be spinning it, and it'll just be I'm like, how are you doing that? Like, he just knew the backboard so well that he could just throw it up there. And then there was an older guy. What is the older? He had to be in his like 70s. I can't remember his name, but his 3-pointer was still golden. And so they're my inspiration, where I'm just like, I just have to figure out, because I'm a shooter, so like I just have to not jump and then get that arm strength.
Right.
Because there will be people, like older guys, that sucked and they were still out there playing basketball. So the least I can do is keep playing, and I'm good. That's my service to humanity.
Yeah, it's just fun. There was a point in the 70s where my friend Edward came up from Virginia, and we went to play basketball, and my friend Paul was there too. And Edward said, hey, watch this. And he took the ball, he stood underneath the hoop, and he just jumped straight up and dunked it backwards through the hoop. And Paul and I looked at each other and said, oh, we got to try this. And now all 3 of us are around the same height, right? We're about 6'4". Right. And so Paul tried it, and he did it. And then he gave the ball to me, and I went up, and I actually did it. And I was like, that was something I would never have thought I could do until I saw one of my friends do it. But at the time, I was like 19 years old and going to play ball after work. And I would work during the day at an office as a temp, and then after work, go up to the schoolyard and play ball just to fool around, just to have fun. But that was such a great feeling. I still remember that night that happened, and thinking to myself, I never would have thought that I could do what Will Chamberlain used to do.
Man, I was 5'9". I am 5'9". I don't know how tall I was in like 8th grade, where I got my dad to buy me like the shoes with the little thing up front. I'm like trying to learn how to dunk, and got the little VHS tapes where they teach you. And I'm like, I want to dunk, but you're a whole 6'4". Never like well, no, what could I have done if I was 6'4"?
Well, I never took it seriously, so that's why I never really tried it. So when I started to play basketball, it was I must have been 15, and I said, all right, I'm just going to start going to the schoolyard and play with the guys up there. And I wasn't like really into it because I knew I had other things to do. Right. So for me, it was just another thing to have fun, was shooting around on the court and riding my bike. Those are the 2 things I did for fun, and then drawing. So it was this one time I went up for a rebound, and I actually cut my arm on the backboard. and I had this big gash on my arm just from going up at the wrong spot. And when you play in the schoolyard, the backboard is pretty raggedy from being hit all the time. So I almost got a splinter, but I didn't. So yeah, it was just a thing to have fun. And one of the first things I animated on my own at Crippen's when I got there in '80 was a guy going up to do a dunk. And I just made up this little tiny figure running down court, picking up the ball and going up and dunking the ball. And it was very slow motion type thing. And they shot it on film on 35. It was the first time my stuff was shot on 35mm film. I looked at it on the Moviola and I was like, wow, I actually did that.
Nice.
That was a big high doing that.
Cool. So where can people follow you on social media? You have so many things.
I have an Instagram account and I'm on Facebook. I don't post too much on Facebook, but I do have stuff on Instagram, which of late I've been posting drawings I did as a layout artist on The Simpsons and stuff I did as an assistant animator on various Hanna-Barbera shows. So there's a bunch of my drawings up there. The newer drawings, keep scrolling and you'll find some of the newer stuff I do. And then on YouTube, just type in my name and you'll see my animation lessons. And I just started doing that last year at some point. And I got to a certain point, like I think December, January, things got really busy and I had to knock off. But I plan on getting back to it. And it's both paper and digital.
Nice.
And what I want to teach is how you can make your own animation with cheap or low-cost software. You don't have to spend $600 on a software package. You can do it with the software that came with your computer. I'll show you how to make a camera stand to put your SLR or your point-and-shoot camera on to shoot your animation with a cheap set of peg bars on animation paper that you can buy at the art supply store. So that's one thing I want to give people is make your animation that's very inexpensive now as opposed to back in the day.
Yeah, make sure. So if you made it to the end of this video, please make sure to go support his YouTube channel, leave comments and all that stuff. And for everyone out there, I would like you to like so I know it's real, comment and tell me how you feel, subscribe to Citadel, and sign up for post notifications to show your zeal. And I will see you in the next video. Peace.